I'm Naomi Wenk, Production, Attraction and Investment Director at Screen Queensland. Thank you for coming along. It's wonderful to have so many of you join us today, albeit virtually. Firstly, I wish to respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the country on which we work and live. We recognise their connection to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to them, their cultures and to their elders, past, present and emerging. At Screen Queensland, we're deeply committed to uplifting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voices and increasing diversity on and off the screen. And now, just a bit of housekeeping. We've had some amazing response to the ability to submit questions on registration, and we'll try to get to as many of those as possible at the end of this session. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce Amy B. Harris. Amy,
hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm truly honored to be here. Shooting in Queensland has been a real dream.
Fantastic. We're so pleased to have had the show come to our fine shores. We'll just give a bit of an intro to you, Amy. Amy's the executive producer and showrunner of The Wilds for ABC Signature and Prime Amazon Prime. She also developed and executive produced The Carrie Diaries and served as a writer and producer for the Emmy and Golden Globe award-winning series Sex and the City. Amy's credits also include The Comeback, Gossip Girl, Wicked City and Designated Survivor. Amy's fresh off production on the second season of The Wilds, which was supported by Screen Queensland through our production attraction strategy incentive. The series was created by Sarah Stryker and is produced by Lena Curtis and Honor Byrne, with production services provided by our very own Queensland-based production company, Hoodlum. Amy, before we dig deep into The Wilds,
yes,
I know we'd all love to hear about your career trajectory. In doing my research, I came across a lovely story about how you're in your first job out of college at Vanity Fair and how that kind of sent you on your way. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I had worked at Vanity Fair magazine as an editorial assistant as my first job out of college. And Darren Starr, who had created, by that point, 90210 and Melrose Place. He was sort of, so our families had been friends for many, many years. Since I was, I think, born, our parents had known each other. And of course, he was a Hollywood god in my mind. By the time I was in college, I was like, I was a huge fan of his shows. I watched them in high school, and we bumped into his family, and he mentioned to me he was doing a show about magazines and that he would love to talk to me about what it was like to be an editorial assistant at a magazine like Vanity Fair, which of course I was utterly blown away that someone of that level would have any interest in talking to me about anything. I was 22 years old. And so we had a breakfast where I told him all about being young in New York and what that was like. And I found out they were going to shoot the show he was doing in New York. And I just decided, and I think this is like, for me, the thing I would always tell people over and over again, if you have an inkling to reach out to someone, do it. The worst they can do is not respond at all. And that's really not a terrible thing at the end of the day either. You just sort of move on. But I wrote him a letter because email was just starting. That's how long ago this was. And I just said, if you shoot this in New York and there's any opportunity for me of any sort to go pick up coffee or someone's laundry, I would love to experience something in this industry. And his assistant was not moving to New York. And so he said, why don't you come work as my assistant? And that was sort of the beginning. And then between Darren's sort of opening up and being so generous with allowing me to see the process of how a show worked. And when you work for someone who creates shows and runs shows, you really get to see, if you're smart, you get to see everything and you take it all in and you really appreciate, you might be walking someone's dog, but you're also, learning everything there is to know about a writer's room, what makes certain writers wonderful to work with, what a production designer does. I was sort of everywhere all the time trying to take in everything I could. And then after Central Park West, which was the show that I had given him, my point of view about working at a magazine for, went away after one season. The next thing he did was Sex and the City. And so I was able to come onto that show as a producer. And then Michael Patrick King, who was the other head writer on the show, really encouraged me to write. And we have a very differing opinion of how it all went down. I said something about a script that had come in. I had read it before he had, and he said, "How is it?" And I said, "It's okay. I think you're going to feel like it needs work." And I think he said something like, writing is really hard. You should try it so you know how challenging it is for people. And so I thought, you know what, I will try that. He said he would never have said that. That he definitely didn't say like, writing's hard, you should try it if you want it. But however he said it, to what I heard was, take up the challenge and see if this is something you can do. And then I wrote a spec script of Sex and the City, and he read it and said, and we'd always been talking story, and I was a bit living the life of those women in New York anyway. And he was just very supportive and said, it's time for you to move on to the writing staff. And so that was sort of the beginning of my writing career, and ever grateful for it. So yeah, I had two pretty amazing mentors who helped me find my way.
Wow, that's such a great story to hear.
Yeah.
So influential people, mentors in your life.
Yes.
Darren, and is it Michael Patrick?
Michael Patrick King. Yeah. I mean, for me, those two brilliant writers, producers were really the first taste I had of how to do the jobs that I wanted to do. I wasn't as bold as to think I would ever become a showrunner. I just thought, I want to write and create, and I watched their process and really got a lot of support from them. And then there was really brilliant women writers on Sex and the City whose careers I really admired, Jenny Bix and Cindy Shupak. And watching them, I think, was also incredibly helpful. Just that writer's room was, and to this day, I still talk to every single one of those writers on a weekly basis. And I'm in Australia and they're in New York and LA. But I still, Michael and I do a weekly catch-up call no matter what, just to check in with each other and see how things are going. And I just talked to Julie Rottenberg and Elisa Zaritsky this morning, and they're all working on the new iteration of Sex and the City and just like that. So we've all really kept in touch and support one another through the process of, producing shows is tiring, and I'm just on the tail end of it. So forgive me, we wrapped yesterday. So if I fall asleep, I apologize. But it's to have that level of collaboration. It's why I've always been in love with TV, to work with other writers and producers and build a show, and have that support as you are doing it is, for me, it's really the dream. And it's how I pick projects now is, do I want to think about this topic week to week? And are there people who I will be collaborating with that I am excited about being in a room with and bouncing ideas off of, and then putting all of that onto the screen? So that's a key thing for me now.
And you wrote two episodes of Sex and the City?
Yeah, I was in the writer's room starting in season 3, and we were really involved in the aspect of breaking every episode, but then you get assigned certain episodes. And I spent a lot of time on set, so for example, on The Wilds, I've only co-written, I co-wrote an episode last year and I co-wrote an episode this year, just because even though I run the writer's room and every story is generated within that room, um, I just have less and less time to actually sit down and write those first drafts. And then, but I'm very involved in sort of crafting of each story, and I assign each writer the script. So it's a very collaborative effort. My whole thing with, if a script gets turned in and it's not good, it's a group effort that either didn't quite work yet or hasn't found its way. And if it's a great script, hopefully a writer gets to feel a lot of ownership of how well it went.
Fantastic. So going back to the beginning of The Wilds,
Yeah.
can you tell us a bit about the genesis of the project and how you came to be attached?
Sure. So Jamie Tarzus, who is a dear friend and someone I've worked with for over a decade on different projects, and sadly passed this past January. Um, she's one of my best friends, and she had gone off to Auckland to shoot this pilot. She told me a little bit about the script, The Wild. But it had been a submission. It had not been something she had developed. It was a script that was sent to her that she fell in love with. Um, there was a bidding war between a bunch of different studios and networks, and Jamie was able to shepherd it through the pilot process, and they cast a beautiful bunch of actors in those roles. And when Jamie came back from Auckland, she said, look, she's so smart because she knows me so well. She was like, I have a project. I'm pretty excited about it. You might like it, you might not. Take a look at the script. I can show you the cut we're working on and you'll see what you think. And just, she's so smart, because the minute she said it that way, instead of like, I think you're gonna like, I just was like, okay, I definitely want to check this out now. Because she was like, take it or leave it. And she said, I don't know what I would have done if you had said no. but she was so smart because she was so casual about it. I was like, oh God, I really want this. And I read the script, and Sarah, just her writing is so beautiful and just jumps off the page. It is such an enjoyable read. And I was blown away by the topic she was thinking about. A lot of the stuff I think about in terms of my writing, which is coming of age and the challenges we have as we grow up and grow into ourselves, which I think happens, you know, at 20, at 30, at 40, at 16, you name it, I'm still doing it. I still think I'm coming of age. And just that sort of poignant time in your life. And what I thought Sarah did so beautifully in the script was, you know, being stranded on a deserted island and coming of age and surviving your teenage years are kind of equally fraught, dangerous experiences. And I just thought it was a brilliant way in to tell character-driven stories with this propulsive, exciting conspiracy and also survivalist show. But of course, I wanted to see the pilot because I was like, if it's not cast well, if it's not shot well. And then when I saw the pilot and saw those very talented actors just delivering on all cylinders, and Susanna Fogel just did a brilliant job with the pilot, I was in. Sarah and I met, had a very immediate connection, I think, to one another. We're quite different, I think. And yet quite similar. We sort of realized this week we might both be Fatin and Leah, in terms of just like our attitudes and our energy, that we're both sort of like badasses going for it and deeply sensitive, emotional people. And so we had a sort of immediate connection, and I've created my own shows, but on this one, I really understand that my job is, it's definitely our vision at this point, but at the end of the day, she created this world and these characters. And so my job is always to shepherd through what she initially saw and make sure that we can argue and we have debates like, is this the right place to take it, or where are we going on this character's journey? But her sensibility has to sort of continually live at the top of the experience, I think, for the show to work. So a lot of my job is helping to shepherd that through from start to finish, from the writer's room to casting of our new characters that are coming for this season to finding locations. Um, it's a very, I have to sort of, at the end of the day, I have to make the last decision, but I always want to be sure I know what her idea is before I sort of jump in.
Mm. And so, can you tell us a little bit about the writers' room on season 1? Was
Yes.
how many scripts were written, or like, was it a Bible, or what sort of shape did it come in to you?
So we got they shot the pilot and then they created a room that they wanted 3 more scripts and a Bible, which is a very common thing I think that's happening now. Um, a little frustrating as writers because you want to kind of just charge in after the pilot and get going, but also I think kind of a smart for running a business. I think it's a quite smart way to do it, which is proof of concept past just the pilot. Like, what are the stories you're going to tell for the season? Do you have a sense of what you would tell for season 2? And just sort of, and especially on a show like this, where each episode was sort of told from a different character's point of view, to really make sure we had story engines to tell these stories every week. So we hired what Sarah did, which was so brilliant, I think, is she wrote a show that is diverse naturally, which is there is a woman, a sort of puppet master, who was choosing people because she wanted a diverse environment to prove her thesis, which is that women might do community better at build community better than men. Um, so the beauty in that is you didn't have to sort of figure out why would these characters know each other. Well, a lot of them didn't. There were 2 best friends, there were 2 sort of frenemies, there were 2 sisters. So in the groupings, there were people who knew each other. But then the fun of the show was smashing all these very different people from very different backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, just a completely sort of wonderful tapestry that all got pushed together, and seeing like how they would react to one another. And so she very smartly, I think, built that into the premise, which I think was brilliant. And then we hired accordingly. We wanted writers who came from different backgrounds, potentially from the areas that these people were from, the characters were from, or had similar religious upbringings or athletic upbringings. So we really we wanted a lot of diversity in the writers' room. That was very important to us. It's a very important mandate for Disney and Amazon as well, but for us, it was a creative mandate that had to be met. So, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that would have really contributed to the success in getting such a diverse audience as well.
Absolutely. And really wanting those diverse stories to come from people who are living those stories. I think that's so important.
Did you have to do a lot of consultation outside of the writers' room, where there was sort of perhaps
Yes.
ethnic
Yeah.
backgrounds or?
Yes. So Sarah went very early on to an Ojibwe reservation so that she could talk to young women who were growing up on the res. And that was very important to her that she do that very early up. And then we hired consultants who were Native American specialists. We hired a consultant who talked to us about like sociology experiments and what Gretchen's world was all about. We kind of hired, and we did it a lot again this season with the boys. We would consistently hire, if we did not have a voice in the room that we felt authentically could talk about an experience, we hired an outside consultant to come in and talk through everything. The professor who came in sort of explained how these control groups work, experiments work, how you get money for it, how what's the proper process, what an improper process, since obviously Gretchen's process is not the most by the book process. So yeah, so we definitively, it was very important to us that we always come at each story with a really authentic connection, whether it was a student athlete or someone with an eating disorder. We would not, we didn't really want to tackle stories that we didn't feel like we had somebody who really understood from a very inside out way what those stories were about.
Oh, fantastic. Across the season, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the structure.
Sure.
And that was, which is very much like a featured character per episode, and we sort of flash back to their life before the crash on the island. Would you say there's other shows, other series that influenced you in this choice?
Sure. I think, you know, Sarah, I think very early on, maybe even before she had shot the pilot, knew that we would probably want to be following each girl's stories, that the FBI agents would be our way in each episode. And I obviously put that in quotes because we know that they aren't, that they're Gretchen's people. So we knew pretty early on that was a process we wanted. I think obviously a show like Lost can't not be mentioned when you're talking about seeing backstories and flashing to the present on a survival on an island where people are surviving. So that's a show that I think for many people is the ultimate plane crash series. It's brilliant. So I think that was definitely a show that kind of inspired. And for me, weirdly enough, even though it doesn't do it from a different perspective, The Crown, how it sort of constantly goes from sometimes to backstories of them when they were younger and how it influenced them, I think was something I thought a lot about in that first season also. But yeah, just the idea that, I mean, look, sometimes the timelines for us, you know, you're writing the math we have to do and the calendars we have to build. It's like, so it's day 2 in the post-rescue facility where they're being questioned by the FBI agents. We're on day 15 on the island with the girls, and then we're backtracking to their past stories. The math gets a little heady for me sometimes, but luckily there was an amazing team of people who always were able to pull up the calendar for us to look at and be like, okay, that's where we are. And then of course for season 2, where we've added in the boy element, it got even more jumbled for me sometimes. I definitely was not supposed to be a mathematician.
Yeah.
Not my skill set. But so yeah, I think for us, the fun of being able to, the exciting ability to kind of see the trauma that brought these women to the island is something that was very important. And then how being on the island changed how they see their past, and also maybe gave them coping mechanisms they didn't have before they got there.
And would you say that you had a favorite character to write? And who would that be?
I think I sort of channel Fatten's attitude a lot. Like whenever we're talking in the room about what she would be thinking or saying, I seem to be able to pop her language very quickly for me. I think my whole thing is I love them all equally but differently. And I'm sure everyone can tell now I'm comfortable talking a lot. So there's obviously characters who are less chatty and more straightforward, and I really love writing them because it's a fun challenge for me to remind myself, like, characters always have to sound different. They can't all just sound like the writer. So I love Leah because she's probably, as a writer, the one similar to like Carrie, who's the most writerly, and the way she thinks and talks is the way a writer thinks and talks, I think. But I love them I love them all. I
Oh,
definitely,
Leah's my favourite character.
yeah. I mean, as a writer, she's the one who's always, she was in some ways the easiest one to write those interrogation scenes for because she is talking and thinking like a writer. So it allowed you to give some beautiful voiceover over story as it was happening. Whereas some of the other girls aren't that. And then you sort of have to figure out how to use the way they use language to service the character and the story. So Leah for us is always a little bit the writer in all of us, I think.
Mm. And Gretchen, in our chat before, I was saying how much she terrifies me.
Yeah, I think Naomi, maybe she terrifies you because she's deep down who you are.
Oh.
I love Gretchen because I think she is a complicated villain, in the sense that she's a true believer in something bigger than herself. Maybe she's gotten it a bit twisted at this point, and has lost the plot, in terms of what she's done to these people. But I do think she is somebody who sees the collateral damage is worth it if it saves the world. And I think she is a zealot. I think I wrote a line where she says, like, why do people say zealot is a bad thing? It just means you deeply believe. And I think she feels that. And at the bottom of it, she believes, is she a narcissist and wants success and to be feted for being a genius? Yes, of course. But I think she also truly believes that you have to shake up the world by doing something bold. And she is going to fight to change the world. And she believes she's doing something that could change the world if people would see it for that.
Mm. I saw in an
Yeah, it's
interview.
twisted. I mean, it's twisted. There's
Yes,
no way around it.
I saw an interview with you and Rachel, and she described Gretchen as someone who cares more about humanity than humans.
I thought that was the perfect description of Gretchen.
Mm, yeah,
Yeah, Rachel really understands her in the best way.
yeah. It's terrifying, but very amusing, and yeah, very thought provoking.
Yes, yes. And that's the hope. I mean, at the end of the day, I do think these women are learning about feeling empowered, and I'm at the end of the day, I think Gretchen will have some arguments to make about how she's maybe made their lives better, or at least that will be her argument, I would guess.
I'd love to hear about choosing directors. I was very chuffed and proud to see John Paulson and Sherry Nolan
Yeah.
um,
Yes.
in season 1.
Yes. And
Um,
this season, Ben Lucas and Ben Young. We only hired Aussies named Ben this year. We decided.
uh,
No, that's how we choose. We just said anybody named Ben who's brilliant and talented should come on board. Yeah, the process with directors is very interesting for us. It's this amazing part of the collaboration because they come in, I consider them like our most important guest stars, I guess is the way I would describe a director, because the way television works is you're prepping episodes while you're shooting episodes while you're also in the edit room. So one director cannot do all the episodes. So you're looking for these spectacular energies to come in and sort of bring some new collaborative ideas and vision to something that's already in progress. So you it's one thing when it's a pilot because they're really helping to set the look and the energy and the feel of the show, but if the pilot is successful, then the goal is to continue to build and improve upon what was already shot on the pilot, but also to live within the template of the show. So we love on the island in particular, handheld, very, in it naturalistic. We don't like a lot of over stylizing, but then the backstories are a place where we kind of want to create little independent movies, and the directors should kind of go for it and have the fun they want. And certain episodes, I think, actually ask for certain types of directors, and then other episodes you don't know why someone is going to be a good fit, and sometimes you book them before you're even sure what that episode is going to be, and then sometimes it's as remarkable what a fit it is. This year we had enough scripts that we really knew what we were chasing for each of those episodes. You don't always know. But the process is really, you get a list of amazing directors. You put wish list people on that. John Polson was somebody who, Carl Beverly, who's one of my best friends, who was a producer on Elementary. He had worked with John on that for many years, and adored him. So that was somebody I'd always been very eager to work with. And then John came on actually as an executive producer, which meant he directed episodes, but then he also helped the other directors as they were prepping and getting ready. So he was so important to the first seasons, the look of the show, keeping production running on time. So just a huge part of that process. Yeah, so you meet with, in today's world now, you don't sit in the room and meet with people, but you get on Zoom, you get a vibe for someone and decide whether or not they understand the show. This season, it was different because they were able to watch the first season, and then we could really talk about what this season was going to be and what was going to be different. But in that first season, they're usually watching a pilot and having a conversation with you about what your sort of hopes are. And then you watch material you've seen that they've done before. Ask people who have worked with them what the experience has been like. I find in today's, like, it's just so helpful to have those conversations with other people. The business does get small enough in that way where you're like, oh, wait, they worked on this. I'm going to call so-and-so and reach out and find out. And then sometimes it's just taking a chance on someone really exciting and you're not sure, but you just get a feeling that they love the show, and they're gonna come in and bring something really fresh to it. And it's very exciting because it's very collaborative, and yet they're also, I think being a director in TV is actually one of the hardest jobs, because you are steering the ship while filming is happening every day, and deciding what cameras need to be and helping pick locations. But at the end of the day, you're holding on to something that is part of something bigger. And so you're really managing, making sure the producers sitting behind you are happy with performance, are feeling like they're getting what they need, but also having the wherewithal to kind of chase stuff you want from the scenes and think would really be additive.
Mm. And on a practical level, on set every day, for example, how does your role as showrunner sort of intersect with the directors and the producers?
Yes. So I think a lot of every showrunner does it slightly differently. So I don't think the way I do it is necessarily how all showrunners do it. I run the writer's room and help and build the stories and assign scripts, and then have outlines turned into me that then I give notes on, and then send them off to script and then give notes on that. And then we do a table read, where then we feel what's working, what's not. We continue to make tweaks on that. And then once we're filming, I try to be a little bit everywhere once we're filming. So I try to prep with directors, help them pick out locations. A lot of the locations we already picked out, obviously, the girls' beach this season, the boys' beach, all of that stuff had been established before our directors even came in, because those were decisions I wanted to make to be sure I liked the looks we were going for. But so just going through the scripts with the directors ahead of time, doing what we call a tone meeting so that they understand what we want from each scene. Oftentimes on a show, season 2, you have to remind directors in season 1, this is where this character ended up. So this season we're playing with this journey. So this scene actually doesn't seem like a particularly important scene, but it's actually a big moment for this character. So really we want some coverage here of what that character is going through, even if it's other people talking around them.
Mm.
So really just helping them sort of prep the locations, casting if there's any guest cast, um, going through with the AD, trying to figure out what days are makeable versus which days we will just die on the vine on and have to figure out how to shorten scenes or cut scenes depending. And then once we're in production, I tend to sit on set quite a bit. The first few days with any new director, I'm there every day, just wanting to make sure they make their days so that they have a successful experience. Because when you start dropping stuff from the call sheet, the studio starts getting very nervous and then starts to doubt, how it's all going. So and making sure, oh, you know what, that shot, it's beautiful, but it's super fancy and we're not going to be in it for very long. So maybe one take of that and then move into this sort of more traditional coverage, or, oh, we're going to love this in a oneer. So I love this idea and definitely focus on getting it right. So just sort of having those conversations, and then there's sort of, they've never worked with the actors before usually when they first come in, so getting the actors comfortable and safe with these new people in their space, and making sure their performances sort of match episode to episode. And then and when a day isn't going well, for whether it's raining for 2 hours and we have to stop shooting, just kind of constantly trying to problem solve how to make sure that the day doesn't fall apart.
Mm. And how much of the shoot, focusing on season 2, how much of the shoot was on practical locations versus set? Did you?
This show is, I think, shocking in the amount of time we're not on sets. Because really the only sets are the post-rescue facility, which is the interrogation rooms, the Genevieve set, the beaches, which are really our main sets, are all on locations. So the majority of, it's an 11-day shoot, I would say 8 or 9 of those days are usually on location, and only 2 or 3 at the most are on sets, which is very unusual. That's on most shows, you're half and half. If not more, if not almost flipped, like 3 days of locations, 8 days of sets.
Mm. And what were some of your practical locations in Queensland?
Well, we spent a ton of time on North Stratty, which is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. And just the beauty of what we shot there, I think, is spectacular. Mount Tambourine. A lot of time up on Mount Tambourine. Those were the 2 places I think we spent the most amount of time. And then we shot at Nudgee. Is that the school, Nudgee?
Yes.
Yep.
Nudgee.
We shot a couple times there because nothing better than a high school to look like a high school. We call them high schools. I know you guys call them colleges. I've learned some lingo. I've done all right. And then, finding homes in suburban neighborhoods occasionally. But the bulk of the work was the Boys and Girls Islands, which was Stratty and Mount Tambourine.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I understand there's a second unit shoot in New Zealand. Is that right?
Yeah. So we went the Girls Black Beach, that beach that just the FE2 is not kind of matchable anywhere else. We definitely looked and tried to figure out sort of, and because without revealing too much, we couldn't fake that beach. And so we made the choice. We debated whether to do plates and shoot them on green screen, but the reality of the show, I think for me, has always been, it's so authentic, and the wind and the weather, it just enables the actors to be in it in such a authentic way too. So we did a 3-day shoot there to cover, to make sure we really were able to shoot that beach.
Well, we don't know much about season 2, but was there in the casting of season 2 with the boys? Were there sort of some that are a bit more seasoned than others, and are there any newcomers?
Oh, I think there's similar to the women. I think there are certainly some who have been on other shows before and some more well-known shows. Like Alex was on The Society, which I think was quite a popular show, but a lot of really fresh new faces. So it's a really beautiful combination. We sort of intentionally never want to cast people who are like utterly recognizable, because I think it does take you out a little bit of the experience of feeling like these are young adults coming of age, but just a lot of very special, talented people. But mostly actors. Our casting director is brilliant, and similar to season 1, actors I did not know a lot about until we were auditioning them,
Mm,
and then couldn't believe I didn't know them because they were so talented.
mm. And obviously, you were shooting while the edit's going on. Is that going on back in the States?
Yes, so our post production is primarily in Los Angeles. Our 3 editors all live in LA. Um, Although some of them may not even be in LA at this point because it's all so remote. I don't know. They could be somewhere else, and but I still see them on Zoom and they're there. But yes, so our post is again the Zoom of it all. They're working from their homes because they don't have offices to go to in California. We haven't returned to proper offices in the States yet. So they're editing, and it's the one, for me, the biggest challenge has been they deliver a cut to us at 7 a.m. I go to set, I watch it at wrap, so they wake up the next morning to all the notes that we have on the cut, and then so that's been a little strange, the time difference, and just being like, oh, okay, it's 6 p.m. there. I should call and just run through all these notes with them so we know what we're talking about and thinking about. But we haven't had as much time to kind of be in. Normally, I would be in a room for maybe 3 to 4 days at a time on
Mm.
cuts, really working through scene by scene. And we've had a little less of that for the first few, although we've spent a few Saturdays, there Fridays, just really making sure the scenes are playing the way we want them to.
And how involved are the directors of each episode in the edit?
So they're given a cut. They do their cut, and it's about to have 4 or 5 days that they have access to the cut, and they work directly with the editors and work on their version of it, and then that's what's delivered to us, and then that's the cut we work off of, and then the producer's cut is the cut that moves us to the final cut.
Mm. I was wondering how much of the time shifting was scripted and how much of it you restructured in the edit, or do you think it was pretty much a blueprint for the?
The scripts are pretty, I mean, we might move a scene here or there or cut scenes, but we pretty much built it all in the script form.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
we definitely have an idea of, we try to build in those transitions so that you're very close into a story with whoever the person is. We're flashing back to their backstory and flashing forward to their interrogation with. So those bridges we do build in.
yes. I loved the score for the series, and was just dying to see the music, who would, the Pink song and um,
Yes.
the
So we are so lucky. We have Cliff Martinez is our composer. And so the score is, I think, really deeply special. He has managed to give it a very lush romantic feeling while also giving it a lot of tension. Like it's a combination of like sort of beauty and tension, which I think is remarkable. And then our music supervisors are brilliant. And the songs that they, Ghost in You, which is really one of my favorite moments in 106, where she is listening with her boyfriend when Leah's with Jeff, and hears that song. And then it sort of, she relives it. We had scripted a different song and they said, we have some ideas we want to share with you. And we think there's one that might be really special. So, and boy, were they right. So it's a very collaborative effort. Sarah and I definitely have strong ideas about music and what we're chasing. But again, in TV, the beauty is getting to collaborate with this kind of amazing group of people who, just bring other interesting ideas to the table every day and really just, I think, elevate the work so much with the sound of the show.
Sounds like you love post-production.
I did. Well, I really do believe, like, I think it's a pretty common saying, a third, a third, a third. It's like a show is a third writing, a third filming, and a third editing. And and post, I really believe that. I think a great, I think like sometimes the best episodes are made in post, where it's like you add a musical montage to a moment that sort of felt slow and you intercut it, or I just think I never lose faith when I see a cut that I'm not that excited about. Well, I do. I have a day where I utterly lose faith. And then I remember, like, this is just part of the journey. Like, so we didn't get the scene exactly as I'd hoped, but now we get to play with it and edit it, and maybe it's going to be a better version of it.
Oh, well, congratulations on the success of season 1.
Thank you.
I watched it in very few sittings with my teenage son.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
That's
which
awesome.
led to some awkward moments with
I'm sure.
certain conversations.
Sure. I'm sure it's a conversation opener for sure.
Yes.
Yes.
This has been such a popular session. I just have so many questions that have come through. So I should probably move on to that.
Okay,
Just take some really random ones. Someone's asking about a day on set where you had to abandon the shoot because there was a threat of getting struck by lightning.
Oh, yes, that's very true. Yes, no, when you're working in these, my joke has been this season is, I ran around New York in high heels for most of my production life. And then this show has, brought some really, I've been in gum boots quite a bit with rain gear and, yes. So we had a day where we could see some storms happening off of North Strati, and then all of a sudden it was very clear the lightning was coming fast and furious towards us. And everyone's looking at radars and this and that, and then your safety people are like, it's imminent, everybody get on these buggies and get out of here. So always felt safe and knew we were in very good hands. But yeah, when you have lightning coming towards you, it's time to hop off the beach.
Yeah.
But yes, luckily we have a great team of people who can get us in and out of that very quickly. And sit in cars and wait for the rain to end.
Another question from the audience. How do you compare season 1 to season 2 in terms of how much you enjoyed making it?
I don't know if I have enough perspective yet on this season because it just finished. It was a bigger show this year because we had 8 girls and 8 boys we were telling story for almost double the amount of actors, and so it felt bigger. It felt like a much bigger show for me. The heavy lifting of it felt more intense. Last year I commuted. I didn't live in New Zealand full time, and here I was here because of quarantine and COVID. I was here full time. They're just both very, very special experiences for me. The first, I don't know. I only have one child, so I don't know what it's like if you have two, but I imagine it's like the first one is just unique because it's the first, but then the second one has all these special feelings because you've done it before. So there's some comfort in that. And then there's all these surprises at how different it is too. So kind of love them both so deeply, but definitely a different feeling about them.
Another question for you. How do you think that your experience as a writer have helped you as a showrunner and EP?
Oh, I mean, I don't know if you can do the showrunner job if you're not on TV, if you're not a writer. And it doesn't, and look, I've only written 2 episodes of the show, and I co-wrote them with writers. Um, but just to be able to drive story and to understand why you're driving the story, so that when you get to production and they're saying you have 11 days to shoot this and it's 14 days worth of material, you really understand what material can go and what can stay, and you're not making decisions just sort of in a panic. You're actually like, okay, if we take this story out of this episode, we can maybe move that to this and it won't be a house of cards that starts collapsing. Or, well, I need 2 extra days and now I have to go figure out where to move the budget and find money from, you can steal from this episode to service this episode. So I just think having that creative understanding of what you're chasing every day is kind of key to that job. And in the States, the showrunner is almost always the head writer also. So there's often an on-set producer or directing producer who's very involved in filming. We did not have that this season. We had it last season. But yeah, I think it's super important.
Mm-hmm. Of course, now that shooting season 2 is over, we're already wanting to know, is there any thoughts for season 3?
Sarah and I definitely talk about season 3 quite a bit already. Just because when you make decisions about what the twists and turns of the last episodes are, I don't ever want to paint myself into a corner with no idea of what we're doing for season 3. So we do have bigger conversations about what season 3 could look like, for sure. We have a pretty good idea of what we want to chase. What the details are, I don't know yet. We'll get there when we get to that, when we start really thinking about it. But even yesterday when we were shooting some of our last scenes, we actually ended up sort of shooting the last scenes of the season as our last day. I started having all these ideas and was writing stuff down and talking to Sarah about some stuff I thought should happen for season 3. So we're definitely thinking about it.
Okay. I've got this, I don't understand this question, but I'll see if you do. Can you give us
Okay.
one word to describe season 2 Shoni?
Epic. Shoni is the sort of shipping name for Shelby and Tony's romance.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay.
As my daughter would say, epical, but I'm just going to go with epic.
Epic. Okay. Good. I'm glad you cleared that up for me. Can you confirm that Shelby and Tony are both lesbians?
Yes, I can confirm that.
Okay. Will we know how Shelby hurt her ankle this season?
It's her knee and perhaps.
Okay, her knee. Okay. All right. Well, there's so many more questions. But I think one of the questions I have is, why did you choose Australia to shoot? And did you have any other destinations that you were considering?
So we had obviously a beautiful season in New Zealand that we were deeply grateful for. Just a spectacular crew, those beautiful locations, just the most wonderful experience. And we talked a lot about going back to New Zealand for season 2. The COVID of it all did make that somewhat more challenging. We talked a lot about like how the kind of beaches we wanted for the boys island versus the girls island, and the different looks that we were hoping to chase. So really New Zealand and Australia were both on the table, and up until like right before we sort of were in December making the decision. I was concerned about the weather in New Zealand, as we were going to be shooting a lot in the winter, and on those beaches in the winter, I think I was concerned from a safety perspective about, you know, in the water on those beaches, it gets quite cold. So that became a conversation. And we just had these remarkable conversations with Queensland about what was possible and how to bring people into the country safely. And it just became very clear that this, you know, always say sort of look for the green lights, and the conversations that we had with Australia and Queensland in particular it just became very clear this was a wonderful place for us. And, you know, I had photos sent of different locations in Mount Tamborine and Straddie and in the Currumbin Valley. And I sensed very early on that this was the right spot for us. And some of it's, of course, always financial for studios. Are there tax breaks? How can we use those tax breaks to help with the budget? But at the end of the day, what I do really appreciate about both ABC Signature and Amazon is they want the creative to lead the decision. And we really just felt like this was the right visual spot for us. And then knowing the level of crew and the quality of the crew that we could get here, just sort of sealed the deal for us. Just to know we were going to be walking into a place where, yeah, you guys are very busy for a reason, which is you're quite good at this.
Oh, thank you. I'm sure
Yeah,
everyone loved to hear that.
it's true. I feel really, and I felt that way about New Zealand as well. So it's not these two crews, season 1 and season 2, are some of the best crews I've ever worked with. Just sort of blown away by the passion and the talent and the technical skills. Really, really incredible.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Amy B. Harris. I just can't wait to see season 2. Do you have any idea when we might hit?
We don't have a proper air date yet. We keep asking, and I promise as soon as they have one and they give it to us, we will let people know, because we're very proud of the work that was done here, and we're very excited for people to see it.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for bringing the show down to us here.
Thank you for having us. We really are eternally grateful for this experience in a pandemic. To be able to do it here was just to feel safe and well taken care of was a real gift.
Yeah, and thanks again also for your time today and your generosity.
Of course, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks, Naomi.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.